unfortunately, Jennifer Marks from AMAG's not going to be able to join us. She's, I guess, under weather. She just let us know. But so with the two gentlemen here, Ali and Mike, we'll skip introductions just because of the timing side of it, if that's okay. And they're here at the show, so feel free to grab them afterwards. Also active on LinkedIn, so grab them on that end as well. But the conversation here, so by the way, this is the XForum. We do this all day, every 30 minutes, except for, I think, 12:30 to 1. There's a presentation from either a panel discussion or one of the organizations that are here within the pods that you see. So feel free to ask questions, come back if you would. Stay here all day, it's fine. You could do that too. We're close to the restrooms and food, so feel free to make those available as well. You're welcome. Sorry, I'm a little loopy this morning. But all right, so this conversation is about AI and the transformation in physical security, and specifically we want to talk about the opportunities and the challenges here within the European market. I prepared a handful of questions. There's 3 of them. And we'll get into it with those, and then but we'll also go back and forth, and then also open it up to questions. So we have a mic that we can pass around. I guess it's this one that we can pass around if there's any questions anybody has on that as well, or feedback too. So a lot of what we do with the Access Control Executive Brief, it's really the desire to spark a conversation about today and forward, and this is a good example of that. So thank you both for making it. Thank you all for being here. So I'll kick it off with, as European customers increasingly expect AI capabilities and security, how are you balancing the market pressures for advanced features against the heightened scrutiny and potential certification requirements, including the EU AI Act for high-risk applications? So how are you balancing the demand with the, what I'll call, control?
Yeah, sure. I'm Ollie, obviously not Jose. My Spanish accent will give that away. But for us at the moment in video surveillance, the hot topic of conversation is facial recognition. And under the EU AI Act, facial recognition biometrics is going to be classified under the high-risk category. It's important for us, therefore, to look at what do we need to do to certify ourselves against that act, and what are we doing now in preparation for that. We see, I work across UK and Germany in particular, completely polarizing opinions towards data privacy. UK much more interested in what facial recognition can do, by contrast to Germany, where GDPR law is taken with significantly more scrutiny. So for us, we have to approach that in 2 completely different ways. And I think the last thing to mention for us is we've set up a number of principles to ethical AI. We want to be working in this ethical AI space. We have a committee dedicated to the development of AI. So before we develop any new AI products, new AI services, it goes through an AI ethics committee that cross-check against our guidelines, look at risk analysis, is there any risk associated with that, and anything that we need to be aware of before we start the development of a new AI product or service, which I think is key.
We keep it kind of contained. So we also do facial biometrics, but it's much more focused on access control. From our perspective, I mean, we clearly have to be really careful about how the data is managed and how it's utilized. But it's an explicit opt-in from our perspective again. When I'm seeing between the two, because we do work with a bunch of partners on the surveillance side to generate face biometrics to then be used for purposes of tracking, but the tracking is a terrible word in this industry. Following a person around a grocery store, for example. Sorry, I'm really clear about that, especially where I'm sitting. But we kind of break into the 2 categories, one for explicit opt-in and one for implied opt-in. And on the explicit opt-in, it's, again, if you're using your face, you have to effectively register in that case to partake in that solution. And we use AI in the back end. We don't really push the AI piece of it as much, but it's all convolutional neural networks to look for scans across faces to find differential markers. It's a similar kind of thing, I think. I don't want to speak on your guys' behalf because I don't actually know your tech at all. But some of the other work we've done on the semi-surveillance side is, again, using CNNs to look for differences in scenes. And one of the things we're trying to be really careful about, we've got a set of algos. We haven't commercialized them or anything. We're just kind of testing stuff and working with our partners on this. But we're trying to figure out ways to differentiate between really high fidelity markers of activities versus low fidelity but potentially concerning ones. Stuff like, and I mentioned this yesterday, but when you're going in to hug somebody, it looks like you could be bringing out a weapon or throwing a punch. So at what point do you differentiate what those are and send somebody out to actually go take a look? And that falls back into the regs, especially as we have to contain it for those activities and then how we utilize that data.
So I'm going to go off script from the questions here, and just your comments both triggered me to think about this. What I find interesting is that when it comes to biometrics, there's been historical starting point is always at the dystopian, right? And that seems to get the broader airwaves conversation that go on that side. Can you speak, because you both said ethical biometrics, can you speak to that a little bit? Because I feel like as an industry, we haven't done a really good job of differentiating between ethical biometrics and what I will call dystopian biometrics. So can you speak a little bit to that? Like, how do you differentiate between the two? Like, what are the aspects that I should be thinking about? You know, so I can start, because I feel like if we start naming these things and pointing to them, we can drive the differentiation, because the utopian side of biometrics doesn't seem to be as organized and as loud as the dystopian, but yet things continue to progress in the direction where I do believe ultimately, like, we travel around all over the world doing shows like this and the conversations, and without a doubt, the number one topic I get everywhere I go is around biometrics. So the interest is there in the practical. Show me another way you can do high levels of throughput with high levels of assurance. I don't know how you do it without facial recognition or biometric or whatever it might be. So speak a little bit about the difference between ethical and unethical biometrics, and what are the markers that I should be looking for so I know.
Yeah. If I can start, that's. I mean, I think ultimately ethical AI starts with the design of a system, and how you know, we are of course the manufacturers, we're the enablers of technology, but we're not the final end users. It's our responsibility to support and help integrators, end users use that AI capability ethically. And for me, that starts with how do we control data? How do we make sure that we secure data? And it's used responsibly. That is the real world example. And I lost connection. Oh, it's back. It's back. To put a sort of a real world scenario on that, you go into I don't know how many people have been into like a security control room environment, and there's posters of wanted criminals up on the side. That is a really good example of irresponsible data control, and where actually ethical AI can be so much better for that. So being able to audit systems, being able to have logs of who's accessing that data, when, user administration rights. That's what ethical AI is. And the second you remove all of those controls, those auditability, is the opportunity to allow for unethical AI and complete misuse of it. And that's why for us, especially the EU AI Act is so exciting. It will give us a new standard that we can all adhere to, the people that want to work within this ethical AI space. And it will allow us to push the boundaries in this space rather than be further restricted.
It's funny you mentioned the people putting pictures up inside the Security Operations Center. I saw a video fairly recently of it was a picture of an individual, and it was "do not let person in the building," and they had the set of pictures up on the wall. Somebody plucked the picture off the wall, stuck it in front of the camera, and the door unlocked. So using AI in that scenario is actually kind of useful to say, like, it's a picture, not an actual person. And I didn't just cut eye holes in, like, look side to side and like tilt it side to side to make it look like a real human being, or at least a really weirdly spoofed human being like South Park. From an ethical use perspective, I'm going to draw an analogy to the U.S. because we are in the dark ages of technology implementation there. But if people believe, and I think they rightfully should, that if they can use their biometrics for some kind of real value, where they're not the product, but they're actually applying their own stuff to obtain a product. Like if I want to go buy a beer at a baseball game, using my face to pay for that is great because I probably left my wallet back with my wife at the seat, right? Getting into a soccer stadium or any kind of a stadium is another reason that we want to, again, it makes it easier for the human being to just walk up and go. We're seeing a drop in resistance on individuals using their face when it allows them to have more convenience. Now, part of that, unfortunately, is because what I would say is the unethical use of social media and the natural giving away of data. But it's conditioned most people to be willing to trust a service to use it that way. The flip side of that is also true. If you're using facial biometrics for the purposes of tracking and upselling, I think that crosses a line for me. And I think that most people would probably look at that as being, that's probably the line you don't want to cross unless there's an explicit thing that says, I'm in the grocery store, you can send me an ad to my phone that says, yeah, I really want to buy bananas this week based on what I purchased last week. So,
yeah, definitely in areas where there's the convenience side or it's tied to pay, which it reminds me of the conversations we have around mobile. Like, putting a card in the phone is cool, but the value really is increased when it delivers additional value beyond the utility. And it feels like biometrics has been historically used as a utility. Like, I use it to check into my work, so like a time card, versus it delivering additional value like conveniences or such. So, all right, thank you. All right, so on top of that, so we see that there's different variations of AI. You mentioned the difference between Germany and here. You mentioned the North American marketplace. So what are some specific market factors or cultural differences that are driving these disparities? And how does this impact your product development and go-to-market strategies?
I'll kick us off. I mean, seeing let's take Germany for a great example. In Germany, GDPR law is so strict that if you want to subscribe to an email newsletter, you have to do a double opt-in versus the UK, which is a single opt-in. It's a really good, easy example to show the difference between GDPR culturally. Where does that sit? So naturally, when we are in Germany and the subject of facial recognition comes up, it's not even a starter for a conversation. So versus the UK, we're currently using a facial recognition in a number of places, but across UK, France, Denmark, places like that, where we're seeing it in stadia. So to help manage crowd control, people have got lifetime bans, for example, for football hooliganism or anything like that. Families, children want to go to football games and feel safe and protected. It's a great example of where biometric data can be really good, and the cultural difference there is where the UK, France, Denmark want to see that push forward today, and there's some real hesitation in some other parts of Europe. And it's where, as I mentioned before, the EU AI Act and other certification standards like ISO 42001, which we've just in the final stages of completing at the moment, will continue to give more confidence to other regions for sure.
That's a great example, because if you string together the tech that you're talking about, which is identifying the hooliganism at the point of when it actually happens, and say they were just booted out but not actually effectively like photographed and such, but you've got the video evidence of that, you can then generate a template from that. And then we're seeing on our side of it, people when they go into the stadium and they use their face as their ticket, that biometric data has already been stored as an explicit blacklist, so they can't get back into the stadium. So we're seeing that across multiple countries across Europe. I think the big difference in if I just break the three regions broadly, which is totally not fair, but Asia's way ahead. China specifically, it uses face. They're the most advanced on face technology on the planet for, I think, some reasons. The rest of Asia has moved that way as well, but it's purely for convenience for consumers. So especially at metro stations, if you walk into a metro station, a lot of them in Japan, there's no more cards. You just walk in, you're automatically billed. We're starting to see evidence of that here and broadly across GDPR directly impacted countries. And what's great for us is that it's really explicit. There's teeth to the regulation, and there are rules to follow, which means that you can apply biometric markers in explicit opt-in with enhanced data protections, which then allow you to do more things. I'm both a believer of and a disbeliever in regulations for that very reason, where it can actually help accelerate things. It slows you down in the beginning, but once it's there, it's a lot faster to adopt. I think the AI Act is going to be similar that way. We're just going to have to define the behaviors that we're looking for from a surveillance perspective that we're allowed to do and store and monitor and things like that. So,
can you speak to the North American market?
We're like dark ages, like I said. We're so far behind, it's not even funny. We because I'm an American, and by the way, I'm sorry, just because I have to say that everywhere I go. over breakfast this morning, 3 tables. I'm sorry. So what we're seeing in the U.S., there's a patchwork of regulations, as you guys probably know. There's some really, really good ones. California data privacy rights is relatively well established. Illinois is kind of the gold standard, but these are state level things. Then you have additional state level for insurance and for healthcare and for auto and for banking and everything else. You've got a patchwork of regulations that I think nets up to, what was it, like 172 meaningful regulations that you kind of have to adhere to, all of which look GDPR-ish with their own flavor. That being said, it's also the Wild West, so you can just kind of do whatever the heck you want, and you just don't operate in the states that say, no, you can't do that here, because there's always provisions in those states where certain environments can be deployed. There are no meaningful AI regulations. The only real regulations with any teeth in the U.S. are around privacy. There's nothing for AI at this point, and you're seeing that kind of as a result in the U.S. But I'd like to think that we'll be able to track behind what's happening here in Europe, hopefully.
Well, what's interesting there is this is one of the first things I saw that usually when we talk about the EU, you talk about fragmentation. And in the North American marketplace, it's usually not about fragmentation. That's part of one of the beauties of going there is I could build something for California and it works in Florida. But with this, it's actually flipped in a lot of ways. And it's hard to track and to know what to actually do. And to the point where I actually believe part of the dark ages comment that you have is that you see a lot of people that are just like, screw it, I'm going to go over to Europe and Asia and some other marketplaces where there's either adoption for good and bad reasons, or there's some of the things like the EU AI Act, which is driving some predictability. Like I feel like that's the thing is correct. That the word it's by the way, I'm writing about this because coming out of ISC West and then coming to here, if you're familiar with ISC West, it's basically the security event in North America on like steroids. But the thing that is driving a lot of the conversations is there's a ton of unpredictability in the business currently right now, and we have been an industry, security specifically, that has been built off of predictability. Like our practices, the way we approach safety security, all of that has been very predictable for 30 years. Incremental change, not a lot of drastic change, and now all of a sudden it's flipping to unpredictable, and this is in that realm. I want to open up questions real quick. I've got another question, but I want to make sure if there's any questions anybody has. Yeah, you have a question? Great.
Good morning. By the way, we recognize you are an American for the talk already. No problem. Regulation is the key, for sure. Everybody is afraid of AI taking by the man. But what kind of measures are made for the technology stops the man when it needed? Because internet, AI are like tools, they're for good and for bad. So if you use it well, you can give your blood information and you will buy a pizza and the system says to you, oh man, attention, you have a high probability to have issues if you order too many pizzas. But it can track you in your way of life and control you. Depends on who's in charge. The new Web3 is a new solution for this decentralization in new kind of security in this question of the over control of the technology for bad meanings.
Wow, I'm sorry. There's actually one really good example of this right now, and I can't remember which one it is, but one of the genetics providers just went bankrupt in the U.S. and 23andMe, thank you. So 23andMe has the genetic data of I don't know how many hundreds of millions of people, and it's literally for sale. So and if they sell that data to somebody else, then ostensibly, if I put on my happy hat, it's to use it to generate more genetic research. If I put on my other hat, which is where I think you're going, which is now I can use it to identify anything anywhere, which is really kind of spooky. I think from So we're tool builders, right? And again, I'm not speaking on your behalf. We're tool builders. We build tools that people can use biometrics, and we have very strict requirements when we sell to a customer that it can only be used for certain purposes. I can't really enforce those. I can just not sell them more of it. And even then, it's kind of hard to control because they can buy it through somebody else. But if it's up to the folks that are doing the implementation to make sure that they're doing it in such a way to not share that data. So for example, if I'm working with a big football stadium in the U.S., which is true, if they sell that data to one of their marketing partners and that biometric information is now available to grocery stores, that is a violation of trust that I don't think the American public would be able to get over very quickly. We have short memories and sometimes we're not so bright, so maybe. But I think that once you cross that particular barrier, it's a dissolution of trust by the entity that breached that trust. So I think it's really dangerous at this point to just be really free for all with the data.
It's also why both the combination of GDPR and the EU AI Act are absolutely vital to be put together. And to go back to your question in particular, you started by saying it's about regulation, and it is about regulation and control. And we are tool builders, and we're technology manufacturers. So for us, it's about ensuring that we can have a system that is set up to be used responsibly. We can advise and have partners who are certified. We train our partners in how to use AI responsibly. And then the responsibility is down to those end users to enact those protocols sensibly. But when you have good partners, when you have certified partners who have gone through that, and we're not just selling it to anyone and everyone, that's where we can, I think, really get the most out of it, and the trust ultimately, not only of the end users, the customers who are, whether it's people coming into a football stadium, for example, of how that data is being managed and used.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. Long history of people using things for bad reasons, and also a very long history of people using good things for good reasons, right? So I don't think this would be any different. I do think the difference, though, that we all need to start doing is have more conversations like this and normalize the positive side that's there, hold people accountable that do it wrong. I do think the AI biometrics community has done a horrific job of marketing, communication, telling good stories in a lot of ways. We get very focused on, like, I do 42 things in your face and this guy does 32 and that's why we're better, but haven't done a really good job of telling value creation stories and then holding each other accountable. So there are, within associations, I could speak to the Security Industry Association in North America, that are coming together to create best practices, hold each other accountable. There's ethical committees too to highlight the difference between them and stuff like that. We need to do a better job of that as an industry, and I think, again, these types of conversations need to happen, and we'll continue to do it. All right, I'm sure there's a bunch more questions. If there are, please, you know how to get a hold of these two here. Thank you all very much for taking the time to be here. Thank you for a great conversation. We're going to continue to do stuff like this the rest of the day, so thank you.